The Florida Joint Center for Citizenship presents Voting Rights, Video 2, The Impact of Amendments. There's so many amendments that have had a huge impact on our ability to vote. Remember that the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery. The 14th Amendment said that anyone born or naturalized in the U.S. was a citizen, and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th means that states cannot limit the rights of citizens. The 15th Amendment said you can't deny someone the right to vote just because of their race. The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. The 24th Amendment outlawed poll taxes or having to pay to vote. The 26th Amendment lowered the national voting age to 18. And after the 26th Amendment, all citizens, regardless of race or gender, could vote if they were at least 18 and registered where they lived. And in this video, we're going to explore how these amendments impacted political participation. After watching this video, you'll be able to evaluate the impact these amendments have had on various social movements. I analyze historical scenarios to examine how these amendments have affected participation in the political process. But be sure to watch the video on the voting rights amendments to make sure you really understand them. So let's dive in by reminding ourselves of the important question. How did the amendments impact social movements and citizens' involvement in the political process? And we'll begin where we began before, with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Some states oppose the outcome of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments and try to use state laws to keep African Americans from voting and participating in political life. And it begins with what are called literacy tests. Literacy tests were often used ways to keep African Americans and poor people from voting. For example, in Alabama, people had to take a test that had to be answered completely and perfectly in a short time. If African Americans taking the test missed even one question, they could not register to vote. In Mississippi, the literacy test question might ask something like, how many bubbles are in a bar of soap? Ridiculous, isn't it? And when you couldn't answer correctly, you couldn't vote. These violations of the 14th and 15th Amendments led to a great deal of political participation on the part of citizens. Individuals and interest groups sued states for their rights as citizens. Citizens and interest groups also organized marches and took part in civil disobedience to protest state laws that infringed on their rights. These especially picked up around the 1950s. By the late 50s, many Americans realized that things like literacy tests to keep African Americans from voting were unfair, and several laws were passed during the 1960s to protect civil rights of minority groups, including African Americans and Hispanics. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited employment discrimination based on race or sex, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 made racial discrimination illegal in voting laws and banned those horrible literacy tests. The Civil Rights Act of 1968 banned discrimination based on race or sex in the sale or renting of housing. This made sure that people were treated fairly when they wanted to live someplace. Let's check in. Try to answer the following in your own words. What was the purpose of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965? The purpose of these two acts was to make sure that the rights promised by the 14th and 15th Amendments were not limited by the states. Let's recap what we've learned so far. Literacy tests were used in some states to try to get around the 14th and 15th Amendments. But individuals and interest groups advocated for their rights under the 14th and 15th Amendments. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited employment discrimination based on race or sex. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 made racial discrimination illegal in voting laws and outlawed literacy tests, and the Civil Rights Act of 1968 banned housing discrimination. And the 19th Amendment, you'll remember, gave women the right to vote. And eventually, these women, now active voters, start pushing for an Equal Rights Amendment, which prohibit laws from discriminating based on sex. Now, it's important to note that the Equal Rights Amendment was not ratified by enough states for a variety of reasons. So the Equal Rights Amendment is not part of our Constitution, at least not yet. Now, the Equal Rights Amendment is not part of our Constitution, but the 19th Amendment, of course, is. And as a result, women continue to push for equal rights and run for elected office in incredibly high numbers. Remember that the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age to 18. This meant that young people could be more involved in campaigns, and politicians would listen more to the concerns of young people because now they can vote when they're 18. Let's check in. Try to answer the following in your own words. What was the impact of the 19th and 26th Amendments? The impact of the 19th and 26th Amendments reflected in the fact that women and younger people gained the right to vote and became more active in the political process, running for office, and participating in political campaigns. All right, let's recap what we've learned so far. The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote and led to their greater political participation. The Equal Rights Amendment would keep state and federal laws from discriminating based on sex, but it hasn't been ratified yet and so isn't in our Constitution. And as a result of the 26th Amendment, younger people are more engaged in the political process. All right, we learned quite a bit. But let's think about some scenarios. All right, let's do some scenarios that are based on some of the history and information that you've learned. Try to answer the question at the end of each scenario. On your 18th birthday, you go to register to vote. They tell you have to take a literacy test. What do you tell them and why? You tell them, no, you don't. Because the Voting Rights Act of 1965 made literacy tests for voting illegal. If you're 18, you live in the state, and you are a citizen, you have the right to vote. Let's do another one. You find out that a friend has been denied a job by a government agency simply because of who they are. They don't know what to do. What do you tell them? You might tell your friend that they should take the agency to court because it is illegal under the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to discriminate in employment based on who a person is. Let's try one more. A friend argues with you that there is really nothing that has encouraged people to participate in the political process or to protect their rights. Based on what you've learned, how can you convince her otherwise? There's so many different ways you could try to convince her. You could talk about the 14th and 15th Amendments, protecting our rights because people took part in the process. Women have been more engaged politically because of the 19th Amendment and the fight for the Equal Rights Amendment. You could also talk about the 26th Amendment, which helped young people become more involved. And the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and 1968 happened because people fought for their rights, and those helped protect those rights. So many different ways. Amendments and laws passed to support those amendments have had a huge impact on political participation and what people could participate in our political process. These amendments that we've learned about in this module protect and expand our rights and our access to those rights. You can learn more about the amendment process, your rights, and court cases that impacted these amendments and your rights and other topic areas here in Civics 360. And be sure to watch the other videos in this module to make sure you know about the amendments discussed in this one. This video is produced by the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship at the Lou Fry Institute. Thanks for watching.